Welcome to this video on how not to run out of cash. Imagine being the owner of a business that has enjoyed recent success in their sales, in their expansion, and their growth, but the business still fails due to a cash shortfall. Cash is that crucial. It is key to business longevity. Did you know that most small business owners don't know how much cash is coming in? Many business owners have difficulty paying their vendors or their employees. They also struggle to have enough cash left over to pay themselves so they can have a life. Many business owners start their spending process by pulling up their bank account balance, then doing some mental adjustments for outstanding bills and other things, and then they wing it to estimate their cash available. There's no need to have cash flow stress. Instead, take control. Join me as we consider the importance of cash flow along with solutions to help you build a strong cash position. Business owners want to stay in business. Going out of business is really a worst case scenario, but it happens. Actually, it happens more often than not. Information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that 18% of businesses fail within the first year. 50% of small businesses will fail after 5 years, while 65% by their 10th year. Just performing well, having high sales and lots of revenue, well, that's just not enough. The irony is that a business owner's best month can ruin the business. Take this example of Carrie's Catering. She contracted her biggest client ever, catering for a 4-day mega conference. Although the contract dwarfed any other client she had ever had before, and it meant a large profit to her, she lost her business when payroll fell through and her best employees found more stable employment. How? Cash flow management. Cash is needed for inventory, supplies, and payroll when new customers are gained or to service larger orders. However, the new business may not return as cash from the sale for many months. So here's the solution: cash flow management. Understanding and planning for cash flow reduces business risk. It lessens stress and can help you meet your goals of growth, stability, and personal abundance. Cash flow is the most important aspect of successfully running a business. Managing cash flow by understanding cash flow drivers is the key. But what about profitability? Isn't that the key? What is seldom understood is that profit and cash flow are very different things. Here's an example from a small business. The business seems profitable, making a $2,500 profit in this month, but the change in cash was only $550. You see, profit is based on accrual basis, meaning it's based on an accounting view of the business as it pertains to outsiders looking in, such as banks or investors that want to get a better understanding of the business. Sales are put in the month in which they're earned, not in the month in which they're collected. There are other things that differ from cash flow too, such as estimating uncollectible debt or this thing called depreciation expense. You see, depreciation is an accounting expense that's used to split the original cost of equipment up over the expected use of the asset. It has nothing to do with cash. Profitability is very helpful. It provides us with a better overall understanding of the business. However, what keeps the doors open is cash flow. Profitability is tied to cash flow, but a direct approach to cash flow serves the business owner more directly. This cash flow example shows cash coming in directly or going out directly. It comes down to the cash convergence cycle. This is really the root of the problem for many business owners. The cash convergence cycle is the number of days the company has cash that's tied up in receivables and inventory, minus the number of days that trade credit is provided to the company from their suppliers. Let's look at a quick calculation just as an example. We'll look at Apple and Intel. I know these are very large businesses, but they give us an interesting story. Apple's short inventory time, only 15 days, and the long time it is allowed to pay vendors, average of 90 days at the time of this report, is going to result in a negative cash convergence cycle. What does this mean? Well, effectively, Apple can invest the cash for about 54 days, and the investments are basically financed by Apple's vendors. Intel is on a different trajectory. they have a long inventory outstanding that's resulting in a long cash conversion cycle. So it takes them approximately 61 days to reap the benefit of their sales in the form of cash. But what we can learn is that this cash conversion cycle is not something that has to just happen to the business, but can be managed by the business managers. The key is to understand your cash conversion cycle for your particular business and to purposefully manage it. A shorter cash conversion cycle is going to mean less exposure. One solution is to focus on what is going to drive that cash flow. Here's an example of cash flow tracking. We have a two-step process that we're going to look at. You can see that in the first step, we look at the profitability, and then in the second step, we're going to make adjustments for cash. In each of these steps, we focus on what is driving the numbers that result in the cash flow. Understanding these drivers is going to help us to make plans and management. Let's break this apart and look at this in smaller pieces. First of all, let's look at the profit side. Now, I said earlier that profit was not the same as cash. However, that being said, we do need to start with profit, and then what we'll do is we'll make adjustments to get back to the cash. Once we've calculated our profitability, then what we'll do is we'll look at the adjustments to receivables, payables, and where cash has been paid or received in other areas, such as buying or selling assets like equipment, or if we took out more debt or paid any money towards the owners. We'll look at each driver, each of these areas. So what activity drives the sales? This depends on the business, obviously. So the business owner needs to have a good understanding of where the sales are going to come from. Marketing, for example, is a key component. Customer retention, selling prices, getting leads, converting those leads, and then how often the purchases are made. Is it one-off type of activity, or you're in a business where you're making sales to the same customers on a regular basis? Reviewing these activities with the business manager and owner is going to help us to determine where we can bring in the revenue, which we can then work towards converting into cash quicker. What about the cost of sales? Cost of sales are the direct cost associated with each sale. These costs are incurred for both sale of product or if it's a service. These might include cost of labor to complete the job, cost of materials and supplies. Reducing the cost of sales will have an immediate impact on the profit for each job. These costs must be managed since they are directly impacting the gross profit, and they help to keep more cash in the business. We can impact this through training, supervision, technology, experience, finding other vendors for the supplies. These are all things that need to be discussed and worked on with the management. Payroll includes any labor that we haven't already included in the cost of sales. So this could be like an office manager, interns, company drivers, anything like that. When payroll is efficient, the business gets the value provided from each position at the optimal cost to the company. Efficiency of the staff is what must be managed. Discussions with the owner about having the right amount of staff who are trained and well supervised will lead to results from the staff and improvements in the business office and potentially in operations. Now, we talked about sales earlier, and that's where marketing came into play. But marketing is one of the expenses. And so if we focus on marketing a little bit more, we'll see how crucial it is for the success of the organization. But it's not easy. Marketing can be very much a challenge. Managers and owners both will need marketing that's going to work for the company. So we'll consider the marketing budget. What plan do they have for marketing? And who is in charge of marketing for the company? Do we need to bring in any marketing experts? What kind of marketing venue has been used or do we want to use? Like online or social media? There are traditional options. Or should we hire a sales staff? We need to set goals and track results. Every business is slightly different, and so they're going to have other costs of doing business. Management must track the costs, including insurance, utilities, repairs, and maintenance. These are all necessary, but they can get out of hand. Oftentimes managers overlook these and consider them a small amount or not that important. But if you're working towards an efficient organization, then this can go a long way. So we'll budget, we'll plan, and we'll track. So after we have profitability, then what we need to do is we need to work back into how much of that profit is going to result in cash flow for that particular period of time. First of all, let's look at receivables. Receivables are when you have customers that have not paid you yet. They owe you money. So changes in receivables will result in more or less cash. If receivables are increasing, that means less cash is collected. If receivables are decreasing, that means our cash flow is going up because we're collecting more cash from previous periods. We have to manage the receivables. This is a very important consideration. Payables occur when your business owes for past services, deliveries, inventory that was purchased but not yet paid for, supplies. Payables are what you owe others as part of your cost of doing business. Many businesses will bill you and then you can pay them later. Managing the timing of payables will impact your cash flow. There are other activities that impact cash flow, such as if you were selling off a delivery truck or you purchased new equipment to replace the malfunctioning tools you have. You'll see an infusion of cash if, for example, you take out a loan or if you decide to take in another partner or an investor. Then there are times you're going to need to draw from the business to pay yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I think that's the best one there. So once you understand your business and what activities are driving those different areas for profitability and receiving the cash flow, a plan needs to be made to manage these activities. You can't do everything at once, so oftentimes you'll find that you have multiple areas that need to be addressed. Instead, what we'll do is prioritize. We'll make an action plan that will include deliverables that will be agreed upon between management. Results will be measured, and then we'll evaluate to determine whether or not we had any effect on cash flow. And then we'll make adjustments and go forward over and over until we get to the goals that we want. Here's an example of a cash flow tracker. The column on the left under step 1 provides us with the previous period. As you can see here, our ending cash balance was $8,000. Our cash flow actually decreased that year. Because we weren't able to focus on everything, we decided that this receivables was probably the best place to start. For the target period, the next period coming up, we decided that the only thing we're going to change is that we're going to focus on managing our receivables. In this target, we are hoping to get the receivables to decrease by $2,000. So instead of going up by 6, they're going to go down, and that's going to swing us an $8,000 cash flow swing. So that's the plan that we're going to try to achieve. What we'll need to do then is talk about different activities that need to be done. What is causing receivables to creep up? And what can be done? We'll focus on who should specifically work on this and what that individual needs to do to manage them and bringing them down. Now, in some businesses, you might find that there are multiple areas that need to be addressed. In this case, we just focused on a simple situation where the receivables were one of the main issues. Any business needs to use budgets as part of their planning process. One segment of budgeting is the cash flow budget. So let's look at a shortened example so we can get an understanding of this. Basically, a cash flow budget is going to have two parts. You'll have the cash expected to be collected and then the cash that's expected to be needed. These two sides of the same coin are then combined to find any areas of weakness. First, the cash flow collection budget is drawn up. Here's an example of one from a small business that sells jewelry. We're going to look at sales forecasting. However, one main difference is that the cash collection budget is not just looking at expected sales, but when the cash from the sales is expected to be received. In this example, the business offers a 3-month installment for customers to pay for purchases over time. The sale may occur in 1 month, but the cash is not collected all at once. The owner has estimated sales, and then they've estimated when the expected cash collections are going to be received based on the terms of the installment and also any historical data that can help them improve that estimate. The other side of the coin is to consider when cash is needed. Since some of the jewelry is made in-house, there is a need for jewelry making materials. The need for direct materials is based off of the expected jewelry that's going to be sold. Then any arrangement with suppliers, in other words, when the payment's going to need to be made to the suppliers, will have to be considered. Will the suppliers be paid in the current month or in the next month? This is really depending on when the purchase is made and what kind of terms they have for paying the supplier. For example, a 20-day payment schedule. Each month you're going to have other bills too for operations, overhead, and administration. This schedule is simplified to only include summary totals. However, most businesses will break these categories into specific costs, such as rent, insurance, bookkeeping, utilities, etc. It kind of depends on the cost. If the cost is something that's pretty well known each period, then we can use that exact amount. But in areas where we have a lot of estimates, we may want to summarize them and group them together. Finally, we take the budget for the cash coming in and the cash going out and combine them together. Now notice that in this cash budget, we did a 3-month cash budget, which can be done as a 1-month cash budget or a year cash budget or 3 months. It can be any amount of time that the management wants to forecast. 3 months works for us in this particular type of business. So what we're looking at is the beginning cash balance. Then we look at the cash collection from the cash collection budget. And then we looked at those disbursements that we had for direct material, operating costs, and other purchases. But there's other things that will impact cash too. For example, owner's draws, buying new equipment, getting loans, or paying off loans. By putting all this information together, it's possible to see when there might be future periods of low cash. If owners are aware of this, then they can start their planning process. For example, cash can be saved up, lines of credit can be established, further investment can be planned. In this particular situation, our cash looked pretty good for January and February, but in March it looks like we had ending cash before financing that was negative. And so that allows us the potential to plan for a supplemental cash, and we're going to hope to get that through borrowing. We're going to put a plan into place now to have that cash available in March, so that March's cash flow does not hit any snags and causes any problems. So the cash budget basically allows us the ability to plan ahead and not be surprised by any cash shortages. It's important to note that the budget does not tell the managers or the owners what to do. It just gives them a heads up for planning purposes. Without this information, the owner is responding to emergency mode whenever cash supplies get low. It's much better to plan this stuff, and that way we can take advantage of the situation in the most efficient way possible. We all know there are preppers that plan for the worst. A couple of tools can be used to help managers and owners in their quest to be prepared for the worst situations. Let's take the lockdown of 2020. What could expense analysis do to help us understand how to be ready for this type of situation? Let's look at 2 strategies to consider for general preparations: cash behavior and access to additional cash. First, small business entrepreneurs must understand cost behavior. We'll consider 2 general cost behaviors that most costs generally fall under. First one is a fixed cost. A fixed cost is a cost that behaves by being the same amount each month. One cost is typically a fixed cost is rent. Most businesses pay the same amount for rent each month. This rent amount is going to be due whether or not the business has any sales. So if the sales are low, they pay the same amount as if the sales are high. There's another type of cost too. It's called the variable cost. Variable costs increase when you have more orders, more customers, more jobs, etc. For example, the more jewelry that the jewelry store sells, the more jewelry making material will be needed to make the jewelry. This means that the cost for the materials is going to continually increase as they continually increase their sales. There are other variable costs too, such as their direct labor. For example, if the jewelry store owner hires a jewelry maker, so they hire a person to specifically make jewelry. That jewelry maker is going to work more when more orders are taken. So as orders increase, the labor increases. That's the way you know that we have a variable cost, because the cost is changing based on the activity that's going on in the organization. For example, a restaurant owner may have to hire more servers, more cooks, and then they'll work longer hours the more sales they have. However, variable cost will also go down when sales go down. So if there's less customers, then that means variable costs are also going to decrease. If the business closes down because of lockdowns and no more jewelry is being sold, then we no longer need to buy materials to make more jewelry, and we no longer need to pay the jewelry maker during a time when there's no jewelry being sold. So the variable cost will decrease as your activity decreases and increases as your sales and other activity increases. So understanding this can be very useful for weathering storms. Fixed costs can be useful by keeping the cost the same no matter how much sales are made. This means that in periods of high sales, the managers get to keep more profit. However, in bad times, when sales are low, fixed costs can be pretty risky. If a business is closed for any reason or experience some kind of dramatic drop in sales, the fixed costs are not going to reduce themselves. They still must be paid. A restaurant owner that has had his business closed will still have to find the money for the rent. This can be very stressful. For businesses that plan on the worst or do not have steady sales, keeping the fixed cost as low as possible is going to reduce their risk. It's going to help them prepare for that storm. Of course, it is almost impossible to have no fixed costs, but managing the amount is a good prepper step. Having more variable cost in the cost structure makes it easier to survive a bad period of time. A business with 100% variable cost that has to incur a shutdown would have zero expenses during that shutdown period. This is very useful for weathering the storm. Business owners that survive a shutdown must also have some level of cash. That means they must be able to access cash in some way. Planning for this in advance is important. Where can the business get cash? Well, number one, save. Saving cash for a rainy day is a good idea. However, how much cash? What to do with it while it's not being used? And how much time it may take to save it up are all important considerations. First, the business has to develop their plan to start having positive cash flows if they do not have that plan already. Then once they have positive cash flows, there's going to be an amount of time that's going to be needed to save that cash up. While it's being saved, there may be situations, and so we may need other options. So the second option is borrowing. Generally speaking, too much debt is just another risk factor. However, while the business is saving cash, there may be a bad situation. The quickest access to cash may come in the form of borrowing money. This may be a line of credit, for example. However, lines of credit often need to be put into place ahead of time instead of waiting until the final hour. An unexpected closure may result in the business being unable to get the loan fast enough. Also, once the business is shut down, the bank may not see fit to even give the line of credit. So a third option, investment. Is it time for the owner to pony up more money? Does the owner have the cash reserves that he or she needs? If not, is the owner willing to take on outside investors? Keep in mind, the more outside investors we take in, the more reduction in control we'll have. Investors also may be in short supply if the business is weathering a shutdown or similar storm. There may not be a perfect answer. However, these questions need to be addressed in advance. There's much better chance of success for weathering a storm and accessing additional cash if we plan it out and are prepared for it in advance, rather than waiting until an emergency occurs and then we've got little or no options. Well, I hope you enjoyed that presentation on how not to run out of cash. I hope it was insightful and gave you some ideas and some direction. You can find more information on my website, www.knightcfo.com. And while you're there, sign up for free consultation or business analysis. There's no pressure involved. We'll just discuss your business and how you might meet your goals for profit, cash, and growth. You can find a scheduling calendar on the website, and I would enjoy meeting you.